The morning began like any other day in the plains of Shinar, under a blistering desert sun. Tens of thousands of builders worked in perfect unison, speaking a single language. But on the high scaffolding of the great tower, something shifted in the air. A stonecutter turned to his brother to ask for a hammer, but what came out was gibberish. The brother replied, but his voice sounded like a chaotic rush of unknown sounds. Panic spread like wildfire across the high wooden platforms. Men who had worked side by side for years suddenly stared at each other as strangers. The tools fell from trembling hands, clattering against the ancient stone. Arguments broke out, fueled by the terrifying realization that they were deaf to each other's thoughts. The foreman shouted orders, but his voice was lost in a sea of babbling tongues. A worker tried to point at a rope, but his partner brought him a bucket of water instead. By midday, the largest construction project in human history came to a complete silent halt. The silence was heavier than the noise of 1,000 hammers. Men sat on the foundations, heads in their hands, weeping in silence. The unity of the human race had been shattered in a single moment. They looked up at the sky, wondering what divine force had broken their world. No war had been fought, no blood had been spilled, yet their empire was gone. The great dream of humanity lay in ruins at the foot of their unfinished monument. They had sought to reach the heavens, but instead, the heavens had reached down to them. This is the mystery of Babel, a story of a global empire that vanished without a single arrow being shot. For centuries, we have asked, what was the true purpose of this tower? Was it simply a monument of pride, or did it hold a dangerous secret? A secret so threatening that the creator of the universe had to intervene. To understand, we must search the oldest records of the human race. We must go back to the beginning of the post-flood world, where the rebel empire was born. Why did the division of languages happen at this specific moment? Was there a technology at Babel that went beyond simple bricks? Some ancient texts suggest the tower was a machine, a portal to bypass the heavens, a structure designed to breach the boundary between the physical and the spiritual. If humanity remained united in this rebellion, nothing would be impossible for them. This was not a threat to God's throne, but a threat to the safety of humanity itself. A united human race under a single dark ruler would have sealed its own destruction. The division was an act of mercy, disguised as a judgment. It forced humanity to slow down, to scatter, and to develop separate cultures. But who was the architect of this global rebellion? His name is whispered in the oldest legends, Nimrod, the first tyrant. A man who chose to become a giant among men, a conqueror of souls. He built the first cities, Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. They had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Nimrod's name literally means, "We will rebel." He convinced the people that they no longer needed the Creator to protect them. He promised them security, unity, and a name that would never be forgotten. They would build a city and a tower that would reach the heavens. A central hub of power where all human resources could be pooled. A system of absolute organization where no individual could escape the collective. In the plain of Shinar, the natural stones of God's creation were scarce. But Nimrod's engineers did not see this as an obstacle. They invented a new technology, the artificial brick. "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly," they said. They had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. This was the first time humanity manufactured its own building materials from scratch. In the ancient biblical language, stone represents God's natural creation. Stone is shaped by the hands of the Creator, unique and organic. Brick, however, is the work of human hands, artificial and identical. Every brick is pressed in the same mold, losing its individuality. Nimrod's empire was built on this philosophy, the homogenization of humanity. Every person was to be a brick in the wall of his grand design. No deviation, no unique shape, no individual freedom. The bitumen they used was a sticky black petroleum-based substance, an adhesive so strong that once dried, it became harder than the brick itself. They wanted to build a world that was completely sealed, waterproof, and independent of heaven. A fortress capable of surviving another flood, a direct challenge to God's authority. If the heavens opened again, they believed their brick tower would stand. They were replacing trust in the Creator's promise with trust in their own technology. And so the tower grew higher day by day, cast in red clay and black tar. It was a monument of human self-sufficiency, a monument of defiance. They wanted to make a name for themselves lest they be scattered over the face of the earth. A name represented their identity, their legacy, and their power. To have one name meant to have one centralized state, one ruler, one destiny. But God's original command to Noah was different, to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. God wanted diversity, expansion, and individual freedom. Nimrod wanted concentration, centralization, and absolute control. The tower was the physical anchor of this concentration camp of souls. If the tower was completed, humanity would never scatter. They would remain trapped in a synthetic world, cut off from their true purpose. The phrase, "its top in the heavens," is often misunderstood. It was not simply about physical height. In ancient Mesopotamian culture, ziggurats were built as portals. They were designed as meeting points between heaven and earth. The word Babel itself in the Akkadian language means gate of God. This was not a tower to reach God, but a gateway to bring the gods down. To establish contact with the fallen spiritual realms, bypassing the Creator. Nimrod was attempting to open a portal that had been closed after the flood, to access the ancient forbidden knowledge of the pre-flood world, a knowledge that could allow humanity to manipulate the forces of creation. This was the true danger of Babel. It was a technological rebellion against the natural order. If they succeeded, they would have re-established the corrupt world of the Nephilim, the world that had necessitated the cleansing of the global flood. The great gateway to the gods was abandoned to the elements. The biblical text records, "And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower." This is a dramatic anthropomorphism, a literary device to show divine inspection. The infinite God did not need to travel, but he chose to intervene directly. He did not destroy the tower with fire or earthquakes. He did not send an army to crush the builders. Instead, he dismantled the one thing that held them together, their communication. He confused their language so that they could not understand one another. The Hebrew word for confuse is Babel, which sounds like the babbling of words. Without communication, the structure of the empire collapsed instantly. The brick kilns grew cold and the bitumen dried in the pits. The great gateway to the gods was abandoned to the elements. The biblical text contains a mysterious phrase, "Let us go down." This plural language points to the divine council, the heavenly host. God was addressing the spiritual rulers of the nations. According to Deuteronomy 32, God divided the nations based on the number of the sons of God. He gave the nations over to these spiritual administrators while keeping Israel as his own portion. Babel was the moment when God disinherited the nations of the earth. He allowed them to go their own way, to serve the gods they had chosen. While he began a new plan, starting with a single man, Abraham. From Abraham, a new nation would be born to bring blessing back to all the scattered families. The division of languages was therefore the birth of the nations. It was the origin of diversity, of different cultures and perspectives, a protection against the danger of a single global tyranny. Nimrod's dream of global empire was dead. He was left as a king of a silent city, his subjects scattered to the winds. The plain of Shinar returned to the quiet of the desert. But the memory of Babel remained in the hearts of the people. They carried the story of the day the words broke to every corner of the earth. This is why almost every ancient culture has a myth about the confusion of tongues. From the Sumerians to the Greeks, the story of the tower is preserved. A warning to all future generations about the limits of human ambition. We must ask, does the spirit of Babel still live today? The attempt to build a global system without God, using technology to control. To create a synthetic unity based on compliance rather than spiritual freedom. The lesson of Babel is that such systems are destined to collapse. For the Creator will always protect the freedom of His creation. The scattered families moved in groups, seeking new lands to settle. They followed the rivers, crossed the mountains, and crossed the seas. Each group developed its own language, adapting to their new environments. The memory of the tower was preserved in their oral traditions. They described a giant structure that tried to touch the sky and the judgment that followed. In the ruins of Babylon, the base of the tower remained as a silent witness. For generations, rulers tried to rebuild it, to reestablish the empire of Nimrod. Nebuchadnezzar the Great would later boast of rebuilding the ziggurat of Babylon. He called it Etemenanki, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. But like the original tower, his empire also fell to dust. The ruins of Etemenanki can still be seen today in modern Iraq. A silent memory of the day humanity tried to build a gate of God without God. We must understand the difference between the true gate of God and the false one. Babel was an attempt to force the spiritual realm to serve human ambition. A technology of control, using ritual and magic to manipulate the heavens. But true spirituality is about submission to the Creator's will, not manipulation. It is about building a relationship, not a portal. Nimrod wanted to steal the divine fire like the legends of Prometheus. He wanted to achieve immortality and power through human achievement. But the tower of brick and bitumen was a dead structure with no life inside. It was a monument to the pride of dust, destined to return to dust. True life comes from the breath of the Creator, which cannot be captured in a mold. He breathed life into the natural stones of His creation, unique and free. And He calls us to live in this freedom, scattered but connected in His Spirit. For the kingdom of God is not built with brick and bitumen, but with living stones. As the generations passed, the story of Babel became a universal warning. The warning that when humanity seeks to bypass God, they only find confusion. The dream of absolute control always ends in absolute chaos. For no empire of man can stand against the decree of the Creator. The divisions remained, but so did the search for true connection. The connection that cannot be forced by a centralized state or a single ruler. True connection is a gift of the Spirit, uniting hearts across different tongues. At Pentecost, centuries later, a reverse of Babel would happen. A moment where people from all nations understood one another, not by having one language, but through one Spirit. This was the true gate of God, a spiritual connection, not a physical tower. The spiritual connection that honors the unique identity of every individual. The ziggurat of Nimrod remains as a symbol of human pride. A monument of clay and tar that could not touch the heavens. The bitumen that held them together eventually dried and cracked under the sun. The plain of Shinar still holds the secrets of that fateful day. The day humanity was divided so that they might seek the Creator individually. To discover that the true gate of God is not built with hands. It is found in the quiet chambers of a humble heart. The humble heart that does not seek to conquer the heavens, but is content to walk in the light of the Creator's Son. Nimrod's name is remembered as a warning, not a legacy. the mighty hunter who became a prisoner of his own ambition. His cities were abandoned to the desert sand. His bricks crumbled back into the mud from which they came. The builders are gone, but the lesson remains forever. We must choose. Will we build our own towers of pride or walk in the natural order? Will we seek to make a name for ourselves or trust in the name of the Creator? The name of the Creator, which is a strong tower where the righteous find safety. Babel is a reminder that human pride has a limit designed to keep us from destroying our own souls. The division of languages kept humanity from executing their worst plans. It was the first system of checks and balances in human history, designed by the infinite wisdom of the Creator, the wisdom that knows when to divide in order to save. The scattered builders became the founders of nations. They planted fields, built homes, and lived in peace under their own skies. They forgot the language of Nimrod, but they remembered the language of the earth, the language of wind, of water, and of starlight. The natural order that speaks of the Creator's power without words. The power that Nimrod tried to steal but could only copy. The copy fell to dust, but the original remains forever. The ruins of the ziggurat are now just a memory of the day the words broke and the nations were born. The nations that still walk the earth today, each with its own language and story. Each with its own unique reflection of the Creator's image. For He did not want a world of identical bricks, but a temple of unique living stones. The living stones that fit together in perfect harmony while remaining unique. This is the true unity, built from within by the Spirit of the Creator. The Spirit that brings peace and understanding without requiring compliance. The compliance that Nimrod tried to enforce but failed. His empire is a ghost of the past, a warning in the dust of Shinar, the warning to all who seek to build their own gates of God, that the only gate to the heavens is the one He opens, the gate of grace, accessible to all who walk in humility. This is the legacy of Babel, the day the words broke to save the human soul. The human soul that belongs to the Creator, not the collective that tried to build a monument of brick and bitumen, but succeeded only in spreading the glory of the Creator to all nations. The nations that now praise His name in 1,000 different tongues. Each tongue unique, each voice precious, each story a reflection of His wisdom. The wisdom that divided us in the plain of Shinar to bring us together in His love. For His love is the only tar that can truly bind us together. The only bond that can never be broken by the confusion of languages. And so the ruins of Babel remain as a symbol of hope. A symbol of hope that no empire of man can ever conquer the freedom He has given us.